Stefanie, welcome back to the show. I am so excited to have you here for our Jefas y Mamás podcast series because, girl, you are such an inspiration, okay? You are out here showing women what is possible, financial independence, living your best life, being an expat now. Like, it's just, and you're a mother, just to add on top of that, former corporate girly, raising an incredible family in Portugal. We're going to catch up on all the things, but first and foremost, how are you? How is 2025 treating you?
I feel a lot of people's stress, even though we're not there.
This year has started off hella ghetto, and I think it's only going to get worse.
Like every week, I'm just waiting for the latest breaking.
I'm assuming that you're happier than ever, that you're watching from a distance. And I think there's a lot of people who are going to be inspired by our discussion today because I think more than ever, I'm seeing like the trending topics of moving out of the United States and like not just for obviously the political turmoil, but I think a lot more people are realizing that the American dream is becoming less and less accessible. And when it comes to like raising a family and just living your best life, that doesn't necessarily have to happen here. And I'm glad that we're going to discuss how you came to that conclusion in this episode. So thank you so much for being here.
I'm excited to have the conversation.
Yeah. So Stefanie's been on the show to talk about her journey to financial independence. We're going to link her original episode in the show notes. It is brilliant and it's a very unique journey, I think. So give us a quick recap for folks who don't know your story, kind of what that high level journey to financial independence has looked like for you.
Yeah. I mean, I think like many Latinas growing up, the constant message of you have to go get a degree, you need to select the route to a job that is stable.
And you got to get multiple degrees if you really want to be like, the overachieving golden child of the family.
And, interestingly enough, I feel like everyone was like, is she going to? Because I did not get my MBA and I didn't go to medical school and I didn't go to law school, even though I know in my mom's heart of hearts, she still wishes I did. The woman is still also getting, certifications to be like a therapist and psychologist. And here I am with my undergrad sitting pretty. But I also grew up seeing a lot of really hard work. And my dad has been at the same company since he was 16. So 16, excuse me. And to see that kind of longevity in a career was something that I think I still carry with myself. So I was at Dell for 15 years and I tell people I kind of got married there and I grew up there, but I really tried to soak in all the things while there, starting off in sales and then moving over into global roles in the supply chain. And at one point I thought, oh gosh, do I go get my MBA because I need to do the same thing that everybody else is doing? And I got some really great advice from a number of leaders. And I was really lucky to have a lot of diverse leaders that brought me up with them. But I also met a guy who was fortunate to be surrounded by individuals who demonstrated financial independence to him, who's now my husband. And he was the one that kept seeding me concepts of FIRE, like would send me YouTube videos and clips from I don't know where. And I would just go, yeah, I'll watch them later. And I was so busy and I just kept working. Lo and behold, in 2018, we were in the middle of really trying to grow our family. And I got asked to move to Singapore for my job, which was something that was a long time coming. And I knew that I wanted to have some type of expat role. These are like the coveted, like you get your housing paid for and all this other stuff. And I had a leader pull me aside and said, hey, this is a really great opportunity for you guys to build some level of wealth. So think about that as you make this decision. And so here are Joe and I like writing down, okay, here's how much we can rent our place out for. We're going to save this money on the fact that we're not going to be paying for housing in Singapore. And from 2018 to then 2021, we grew our net worth from our first 100,000 to over $1 million because we were shoveling money away. Both he and I, right? I was making multi-six figures. Joseph was an entrepreneur at that point. And we just got very intentional with the idea that if we really took this math that we had put on paper and stuck to it, something would come of it. And of course, COVID happens. We have our 2 kids and work is not getting any easier and people are leaving left and right. And I'm like, what the heck? Something is going to have to give because this idea that I had working till 65 seemed super daunting because I wasn't even 40 yet. There was no way I was going to continue working at that pace. So when we really sat down and said, all right, we've made this progress. What does this unlock for us? I was very done. I say 95% of my job and my work career was great until it wasn't. And during those moments where it started to not be, I felt like it was now, these were all the signs. I need to do something different. But the fact that my husband had been not only an entrepreneur, but a content creator for a while, he kept telling me I had a story to share. I had all this wisdom to impart on other people. And I started taking a chance on that and testing that out in 2021. So I started off helping other women understand how not only to pursue financial independence, but figure out how to understand their numbers in a way that I use, the power of data and the power of information to reclaim, right, my power. And now I'm in this mode of taking everything I've learned over the last 2 or 3 years as, an activist in this space to now do things in my community here in Portugal, not only building partnerships for the Move Me to Portugal brand, which my partner and I own together, but helping other expats, Americans primarily, navigate ways in which they can move to Portugal because it's a massive need here and no one has to do it alone. We've kind of seen what good looks like and how to navigate the first couple of years, and having these conversations and helping people along the way has been great.
I love that. I think there's such power in sharing your story, which you do so incredibly well. And I love to encourage folks that like your journey, just you sharing that journey can be the spark that lights up something for people. And that's honestly why I wanted to have these conversations around motherhood and entrepreneurship and financial independence, because I feel like motherhood has been branded as something very ghetto, something that like really forces us to struggle and sacrifice. And I'm like, but does it have to be that? Like, what if motherhood can be the spark that lights you up and like fuels your financial independence journey to a whole other fucking level? Because now it's just not about you, right? It's about the legacy that you're building. It's about these human beings that you're going to have here on earth. I know for me, like one of my main whys, if you will, in this journey is like, I want to be the cycle breaker. I want to make sure that my daughter doesn't have to choose a career that is high paying, quote unquote, because that's the thing that you're supposed to do. I don't want her to have to struggle about like, how am I going to pay for college or how am I going to buy my first house? Because at the end of the day, we see what's happening. The writing's on the wall. Life is going to get more and more expensive. These traditional markers of adult success, like parenthood, home ownership, being able to retire, these are becoming way less accessible to the average person, especially if you're lacking financial literacy. So saying all that to say, I think it's important for us to understand that we have a choice in this journey as parents to either accept that the struggle is the status quo or to use that role that you play now as additional fuel to the fire as to like, why we should pursue financial independence, because your kids need you. You don't want to be this type of parent that's like watching your child be raised by other people. And then one day you wake up and you're just like, I don't even know who my child is. My child doesn't know who I am because I spent the best years of their lives and mine building somebody else's fucking dream.
Yeah. I mean, I think the other thing around this is your children just don't have to be the excuse. And I think when we speak about financial independence, it's like, well, I can't do that because I have kids. And it's like, well, you could if you looked at things a little differently. And there's so many angles to this. I think a large part of it is mindset. A large part of it is being willing to admit and accept that the fact that you're going to do things differently may rub people the wrong way. I remember when I was thinking about the idea of having my children abroad, I was at this leadership conference and it was all for women. So it was like all these moms in various kind of stages of their momming career, as well as, corporate careers. And I was sharing with them that I was really struggling with the idea that I was even putting my name in the hat for Singapore, because I was going to take the young years of my kids' lives away from their grandparents, specifically my mom. And because she was talking about moving to Austin at the time and coming from California and like being there. And I grew up with my grandparents being around all the time. And then it was something that somebody said that was more like, how awesome is it that you're even giving her feelings consideration? But at the same time, you don't owe her all these things either. What if she just wants to spend a new experience and an opportunity with you guys in Singapore, seeing her grandkids, versus feeling like it needs to be the other way around? And I just had to get over this mental hump of starting my core network as a family far away from everyone else. And it's come with its challenges, don't get me wrong. And I have had my kids in a way raised by other people. Like we had a live-in nanny in Singapore. There was no way I was going to be working at the pace that I was working without that help and support. But that was part of our budget. That was part of our plan. And we were trying to figure out like, how are we going to make the non-negotiable things that we as a partnership, Joe and I have, how are we going to make them work? And I mean, even to this day, we still have full-time support, but our nanny just doesn't live with us now. So it's a little different, but we still are investing in things and the support system that we need around us, given the decisions that we've made for ourselves. It's just, it doesn't have to be all or none in a lot of different buckets.
I love that perspective and just the guilt, honestly, which you just touched on, that a lot of us tend to use as the driving factor of why we make decisions, right? That could be career decisions, parenting decisions, where you live decisions. And at the end of the day, people don't have to get your journey. I think it's important for us to realize that you're only going to feel fully in control of your life when you actually start doing that, when you actually start making your opinions and your perspectives and what you value at the core of what you want to do. I would love for you to kind of give us some insight into when you were making the decision to become a parent, right? I find that a lot of people think that they have to be in a certain place financially or in a certain place in their career before they can even start considering parenthood because, oh my God, if I have a baby now, then I won't be able to climb up the corporate ladder or I won't be able to invest or blah, blah, blah. What was that decision process like for you and your husband?
There was more of an internal conversation with myself because when I met Joe, I remember telling him, like, I don't see myself having kids. I just hadn't met the person at the time that I felt like I would make this massive commitment with. And, when Joe and I did meet, we met in this really interesting, weird meet cute kind of like, I met him and he was leaving to go travel across Europe. I'm like, where the heck are you going, man? Like, this is a good thing we got. But I think because we not only met, but we had this time apart to really think about, was this something that we wanted to be purposeful about together? Because our paths could have very much gone this way. Like I could have kept working. He could have continued to, travel abroad and continued to probably live abroad, honestly, if it wasn't for me kind of pulling him back to Austin, to be fair. But I remember just thinking like, I do want to grow a family with this guy. He's really meeting all of the criteria. I was just honestly looking in the wrong place. And I honestly wasn't looking when I met him. So it's interesting when you're not looking, the universe kind of unveils something to you, which was really cool. But then after I met him, I was at work speaking with a mentor of mine. And I was talking to her because she had her daughter. And I was like, I think this is really going to go well. I'm pretty sure this is the man I'm going to marry. And now I'm thinking, holy crap, I want to have babies with this guy. How do you plan for this? And she just kind of looked at me and laughed a little. She was like, well, if you try to plan too hard, it's going to be really stressful. And then what she was trying to say was there's no good time at work to make this happen. Because let's be honest, work and its construct the way that it is not designed one way or the other to support mothers, and not tech, not in the supply chain. I mean, I'm sure we're trying really hard, but we're trying. That's all I have to say. And I'm sure there's a lot of good people trying their best, but when you're living it, it's not enough. So that was her nice way of saying, don't stop your life for this career. But whenever we decided to start having kids, then, this door opens to move to Singapore, and we just bought a house. We had just bought a different car. Like there was no right timing. And we just kind of looked at each other and we're like, well, if we're going to do this, we're going to do this. And here are the things that have to happen if we're going to do it right now. And so when we had our first, we knew that we had to have the support at home. We knew that I had to get really clear about what work was going to mean for me, even though I was still struggling to come to terms with it in my mind that it was going to happen. And then leadership was changing around us. So you're just kind of having to navigate through change at the same time. And then we said, well, we want to have our second within a couple of years. So either we're committed or we're not. And we got real committed to have our second. And I think it was when we had our second that I was like, I know this family is what I want. And thank God we were looking at the financial independence part, because if it wasn't for the financial independence part, I would still be struggling as a mom working in corporate. I know I would be. I wouldn't have walked away.
Tell me more about that.
I personally wouldn't have had the confidence to do it. And when my husband and I went to couples therapy after we had our first son, I was in tears just trying to articulate in words how I was feeling about everything. And it was really coming down to the identity that I had wrapped up in work and the idea that it wasn't working anymore. It was almost like I was navigating through this divorce, right? That was like this relationship that was about to come to a crumble, and I couldn't figure out how it was going to come to a crumble. And at the core of it, it was because I felt like that paycheck was our livelihood. I felt like I needed to have that. And I couldn't wrap my brain around not having that paycheck come in. And so after that conversation, I remember our therapist asked us to go home and do this like homework around, what if everything fell apart? What if you got laid off tomorrow? What would you guys do? Because we couldn't stay in Singapore. It was too expensive. And I was like, oh, we'll move in with my mom in her like 2-bedroom apartment. And we'll do, like, we were thinking of like her worst case scenario. And it was in that we were like, okay, let's rehash our budget. Let's rehash our financial independence number. Let's look at our house and are we going to pay it off? How are we managing this rental? And it was that fine tuning. I was a forecasting expert. Like I should have been doing this way long time ago. But the fact that we took that time allowed me to go, oh, all right, another year and a half. And let's make these bonuses and these RSUs count. And thank goodness, when Joe and I got together, we decided we will live off one salary and everything else that we make, we're going to be putting away in some shape, form, or fashion. It may not have been invested in the right things at the beginning, but we were putting it away. We weren't spending it. So I think a combination of living off of one income together as a couple, getting really clear in that tumultuous time of figuring out work allowed me to go, I can take a bet on myself. I can walk away from this. This is no longer serving me. And man, Janice, like the conversations I get to have, not just even with clients, I'm talking about with just people I meet, the space that I have to take a coffee with someone who's like ran 5 businesses and has like this ridiculous amount of wisdom just to share with me. It's wild the amount of just real cross exchange of conversations and value that I get to have with people because I just have time.
You have the space for it. Yeah. You not only do you have like the physical time, but you have the mental capacity to like even take on these conversations too, because you're not depleted by the day-to-day grind of building somebody else's some business. I love the perspective that you share around putting pen to paper and just like really understanding what your actual situation is, right? Because when we talk about financial independence, what I think happens to a lot of people is like you tell them their FI number and they have like this blank look of fucking terror in their face. And it's just like, oh, well, that's cool. I'm never going to be able to do that shit. So let's just move on from the conversation. Right. And I had a small version of this when I was shopping for a home last year. You know, obviously there's all this discussion around, is it the right time? Is it not? Are we going to get a good price? The interest rate, blah, blah. And I was like so caught up in my monthly payment going up by $1,000 in order to buy versus like what I was paying to rent. I had a whole ass meltdown, like, oh my God, if I do this, we're going to end up on the street. Everything's going to crumble. And, you know, my partner's like, what do you realistically have to do in your business to create an extra $1,000 a month? And then when I thought about it like that, I was like, that's not shit. That's like one person signing up for a program or like hosting a workshop or something. And it's like the fear of losing it all, I think is such a ingrained thing in us as Latinos, as like first gen, of seeing the struggle. There's almost like this disconnect that happens, I think, with a lot of us of what we're actually capable of doing and almost like not believing what we have already achieved because it just feels so foreign. And I'm curious for you, like, have you had those existential moments where I'm just like, who the fuck am I to be a millionaire? How did this happen? There's no way that I can sustain this.
I have it every day. I'm not even lying. So Bernadette and I have had this conversation multiple times, and you know her, and I'm so fortunate to just like have someone like her to talk to like on a random Friday. Then I'm like, I'm still working on thinking like a strategic millionaire. It's not about hoard this million over here and no one ever touch it. And I hope it grows to this magic number at some point. It's okay to go, I want to take a portion of this that I feel like is worth it and deploy it to grow in a differentiated way than maybe just traditional stocks and index funds, et cetera, right? Whether that's real estate, whether that's a part of the business. Like I remember having a conversation with you about just hiring a marketing team. And I was like, wow, that takes some balls to just like put that money up. And it's still hard for me to not think that it's me that's going to do those things sometimes. And so I'm still working on those elements. And luckily, my husband's really good at delegating, too good to the point where I'm like, not for me. Like, this is for somebody else. But he's hired VAs and he had a team of 15 at one point. And I'm like, wow, just to have that kind of mindset, I'm constantly thinking, how do I need to change this part or like work on this thing that I have as a limiting belief that will allow me to scale in a lot of different ways. Part of that was motherhood and giving, up some control and having someone take care of the kids on and off. But on the financial side, like I still struggle to think about making moves like a millionaire versus not.
Do you think that parenthood and just like this inherent need to protect your children that we all have influences how you make money decisions? Are you just like more cautious or more risk averse because you're just like, well, it's not just me that can end up in a shitty situation. Like this could be all of us if I don't make the right choice.
I think it's more, I know myself and I have to learn, like women, sometimes we tell ourselves, oh, we got to be 95% qualified for the job before we'll apply for it. If I'm really going to take something seriously, I feel like I need to know 95% of it before I'm going to really take it seriously. You know what I mean? And so when it comes down to like doing different things or taking a bet on certain things, I have to be really comfortable to the extent that it's not too risky to me. Well, the Women's Wealth Effect over the last couple of years was me getting to that 95% point of going like, okay, I know what this social media part is. I know what this community part is. I know the course creation part. I know my clients. I know all the back end stuff. And now I'm taking all of that learning and like dumping it into Move Me to Portugal, which is all the stuff actually that Joe hasn't had time to do. He's amazing at the marketing and the media and like and the outward things. It's the operations that I love and I'm really good at, right? So in terms of how we're investing our time, I'm doing the op stuff. He's doing kind of the marketing pieces. But now when we're looking at like our real estate investments here in Portugal, we're using Move Me to Portugal to an extent to get to know the Portuguese real estate market so that we can feel more confident in the next 1 to 2 years, making some moves that we ultimately want to do here. I feel more comfortable by doing, and sometimes it takes some time. And maybe just taking one course sometimes for me isn't enough to like really apply the whole concept and feel comfortable about going all in.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. And again, I think it speaks to the idea that like your journey is going to be your own and it's at whatever pace you decide. And I think risk tolerance also, to play off what we talk about as investors, you get ballsier as you get more exposure, and you realize like, hey, this is working. I'm going to do more of this versus when you're first starting out, you're just like, oh my God, I'm going to lose it all, even though the data does not support that.
And I will say this, the last 2 years, we've been withdrawing from our investments. And it's been a great test to see like the sky's not falling. Right. So, we're kind of playing with this like mini petri dish or like example of what the withdrawal phase will be for us in our, ultimate retirement journey, kind of in this micro chunk. But it's been a really good exercise of giving us some confidence that for this stuff that we know should work this way, et cetera, we're going to feel good about it when we're full force in that body of work.
Okay, so you are raising your children as global citizens. They have lived in several parts of the world. I'm sure you did an extensive amount of traveling too while you're in Asia, and I'm sure you're doing that in Europe as well. What do you think is the biggest benefit of parents like basically showing their kids that like there's more than just the block that you're from?
Man, I look at it through just the comments that they say every day, like just the perspective that they have in general. Like, I don't even think I was really even building a map of the world until way, way, way later on in my education. But my 5-year-old has literally created a map of the entire world, and he knows people that live in all these different countries. And so just his mental perspective, he even instead of drawing states or understanding the states in the United States, he's like, here's Belarus, here's the Russian flag, here's the French flag, here's this, and he says he's the Singaporean flag. He is not the American flag, he's the Singaporean flag, right? And so just to see that come out of his mouth, like literally hear that come out of his mouth sometimes is like, it takes us back. It's just exposure at the end of the day. He hears about his friends' travels and he asks us like, when are we going to do some of those things? I'm using just my oldest as the example, but like between airplanes and trains, I mean, with the exception maybe a cruise ship at this point, he's been on them all. And I did not have that experience growing up as a child. I do think the other thing that's interesting is like I speak with parents when they're thinking about moving here and they're having a lot of heartburn about, oh, well, we're moving our kids to another school and that transition is going to be really tough, et cetera. My 5-year-old, every 2 years, he's like, when am I going to a new school? Like that is his normal right now. And I don't know if that's going to be good or bad, but he's just open to change. I actually heard this the other day on a podcast. My goal for him is for him to feel like home is where he is, like it's in his heart. And because the reality for him may be that he is not feeling tied to one place. I already feel that way to an extent. It's just instilling that confidence in himself and that self-awareness and helping him understand that he has so much to contribute no matter where he decides to go, because he's going to constantly meet different people and he's going to be the brown kid everywhere, no matter what. And that's going to be a cool experience for him.
Yeah, I think you're literally infusing him with the power of resilience, right? Of just being able to become adaptable to an environment and not to be afraid of change, which I think is such an important asset to have, like as a character trait. I'm curious if there's something that you have discovered about yourself in this journey too, right? Because starting out here in America, going out and seeing what else the world looks like, and especially from a parent perspective, like what are other countries doing very well for parents versus like what you seen and heard is happening over here?
Oh, wow. I mean, we'll just use COVID as the example. I had a support structure in my home from a month before my son was born. And this wonderful woman came in and like, I hadn't even set up the nursery yet. I was so busy with work. And she was like, Steph, maybe we should set these things up. Maybe we should like make sure that you don't have a question about your breast pump. Maybe we should make sure your bottles are actually cleaned. Are you thinking about breastfeeding? And I was like, I remember sitting in this conversation with Kathy and I was like, how have I not thought about these things? I mean, yes, I had the book that was like what to expect when you're expecting, but like I had no freaking idea what was about to hit me when I had my first. And so I think that's one thing. The other thing that's been really cool, and I think part of it's because Joe and I are just old souls, we've surrounded ourselves with people and friends that honestly we're the youngest people in the room in most cases. And so many of our friends are like empty nesters and their kids are out going to college. And just the amount of like wisdom and, hey, it's going to be okay. And I kind of learned through working that just being around the work conversation all the time wasn't helpful. And I kind of, for me, just being around the baby kid conversation all the time is not helpful. I think I recognized after I left Dell that I was not very cut out to be a stay-at-home mom. And I had to be okay with that, but I still wanted to spend a lot of time with my kids, right? To have a lot of flexibility and be there for like all the great moments. But I think figuring out how to spend my non-mom time with things that would really fill my cup were really important. I was just having a conversation with a friend of mine over coffee before working out this morning, like just telling her how much I appreciated her because she wasn't in the mom like throes of everything. And I just I got to have really good, fun conversations with her. And that's okay.
There is this almost like expectation that once you become a parent, it has to become your whole identity. It has to become your whole ass personality. And I'm like, for me, it's just one aspect of what I'm doing in my life. But I am not defined by the fact that I'm a mother. I am not looking for my child to validate my worthiness because I'm a mother. Like I think we've witnessed in previous generations how much emphasis women have placed on their roles as mothers. And it's almost been like, that's the only thing that you can do. And God forbid you want to do something else, or you want to have a multifaceted personality or things that you're passionate about that don't revolve around your kids, that somehow makes you selfish, that it makes you vain, that it makes you somehow less of a caring parent. And I think we just need to understand that like, you're a whole human. The same way that you would want your child to be a well-rounded person who is very adaptable and who honestly at some point doesn't really need you, I mean, as a fully functional adult, we need to model that. We can't be out here being like hella codependent on our children for like validating our entire existence, because what are we teaching them? You can't stand on your own 2 feet if that's the case.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. And, as a woman who has two boys, I want them to see that I'm more than just what the household dictates that I could or should be. And I want them to see that their dad is present and incredibly helpful. And we're figuring out like how we work together as a team and support each other and get excited. Whenever like daddy has to go work, I'm here at home and articulating to the boys like why his work is important versus being like, daddy's at work. And the same, if I'm out with a partner and Joe's at home, or if I'm having a mommy date with another mom friend or a non-mom friend, Joe's like, mom's going to go hang out with her girlfriends. It's cool. I think being able to be transparent to an extent with our kids about just what's going on in our general lives is going to help them see us as whole people too, versus in a box only, right? We are their parents, but we're also people, and they need to see that it's okay to be people.
I love that. Okay. So I know that one of the reasons why a lot of people are thinking about moving to Portugal is potential quality of life improvements, difference in cost of living, just like wanting to have their kids exposed to a different culture, the ability to travel through Europe, et cetera, et cetera. Let's talk about the finances. Like, what are some of the financial benefits of potentially making this move?
Yeah. Well, when we came, what they called non-habitual residency was an option for those that would apply being here, right? So if you came in on a passive income visa, like the D7 visa, and that's what we did, you could apply for NHR. And so they gave us 10 years of our passive income, capital gains, dividends, real estate income, all those things is being taxed at zero. That was a massive benefit, right? And so for us, for the next 10 years, we're certainly leveraging that.
Did you say you pay no taxes on that income?
In Portugal, it's 0%, right? In the US, we're still paying US taxes. So depending on how we access that income, whether it's real estate income, we might pay some level of income or some level of taxes on that. But if you think about long-term capital gains, that's a really interesting hack, especially out of a taxable brokerage, right? People who have taxable brokerages, if you are, let's say you've invested $50,000 into that taxable brokerage, and let's say you take 75K out at the end of the day, you only have 25,000 of capital gains on that amount of money, right? Not 75,000, 25,000. And as an individual, you can be taxed at zero under, I think it's like 44,000 and below for long-term capital gains. So if you look at the tax code from the standpoint of both the US and Portugal, that could be a real big strategic benefit when you look at it through that lens. Unfortunately, NHR is no longer the way that it was. So as of, I believe, the end of 2024, NHR is very different and less individuals qualify for it. However, the cost of living is lower in some cases, specifically your cost of goods, food. If you're going to public school, of course, no cost. Housing's been kind of the interesting one. If you're in the major cities like Lisbon, where we are close to Cascais, it's expensive still, I would say, because of the influx of individuals coming here. But if you're going to the non-majorly populated areas, you can still get pretty good rent, pretty good purchase price, for a home. And so we're constantly having that conversation with people. But the interest rate on mortgages here is half of what it is in the US. So people save just on the interest rate coming to Portugal. And that's a lot of the conversation that we're having with people, is to get to those specific details so that we can discuss, like, what is the real cost of living going to look like for you if you moved here?
That makes sense. And, I think another big factor that a lot of people think about is healthcare, right? The United States is the only major industrialized country that does not have some sort of standardized healthcare system the way that we hear about in Europe and Canada and other places. And I think also the fact that for so many, healthcare is directly tied to employment, it automatically shuts off people's minds to this idea that you can even make that move. So what do you say to people that those are the quote unquote golden handcuffs that are keeping them from doing this?
Yeah, I think the thing I say to people is, your network is super strong. If you're really wanting to make a move, work on your network, figure out what that remote type opportunity could be for you. Because at a minimum, you could work as a contractor, and this whole healthcare piece is not as much of an issue because you get your healthcare here in Portugal, right? So there's now the D8 digital nomad visa. So if you are a contract worker for a company that's abroad, not in Portugal, you can still move here to get the benefits of the healthcare system, get the benefits of residency, maybe move somewhere that you feel like is going to give you a better like lifestyle, because lifestyle design is a big thing if you're going to move to another company. Don't come to a country. Don't come to another country and completely duplicate your lifestyle back at home. Like, I just don't get that, right? And now that we're 6 years, almost 7 years removed from living in the US, people ask me all the time, like, well, what would you bring? What do you miss? And I'm like, I don't even think about that anymore. Yeah, I miss queso and I miss a good breakfast taco, but I've got the beach that's 5 minutes away and my kids are safe. And I don't feel like this elephant on my chest to do more. It's hard to explain until you get here.
Yeah. The European lifestyle is one that forces you to slow down in like the best ways. I remember visiting Barcelona and realizing like, oh, like nap culture is like a thing here. It's like we're actually not penalized as humans for like wanting leisure time and rest. You're just trained to accept capitalism as like the only way to function. And it is very healing to see that there are other parts of the world that do not embrace that same mindset. And I think it opens up your perspective to like what life could actually look like when you understand that there are those options out there. I also want to say, like, for folks who are listening to this and maybe you are intrigued by the financial independence concept and maybe you are interested in like moving to facilitate that, it doesn't necessarily have to be that like you go international right away too. Because for my example, I grew up born and raised in New Jersey, high cost of living area, the Northeast part of the United States. And the first move that I made to pursue financial independence was moving to a lower cost of living state, which was Florida. Florida is one of those states that has no income tax. And so there was an immediate benefit to moving because now I was taking home a larger part of my paycheck that then I could use to pay off debt. And then once I was debt free, I started funneling all that extra money towards my investments. And I know for a fact that geo arbitrage, which is what we're talking about, is such a powerful tool in the financial independence journey, but you have to be willing to maybe, walk away from the environments that you're used to, and people around you are going to call you crazy. My mother didn't speak to me for 2 months after moving. She's like, oh my God, you're going to leave the family. But you have to be so firmly rooted in like the why that you're doing these things for, because if you can follow through and commit to them and understand that there is a purpose for this, that shit will literally change your life.
For sure. I mean, I lived in Texas, so no income tax was a thing for my entire life. But just moving from downtown Austin out into the suburbs was a massive shift. I didn't have that core group that I was hanging out with all the time. And, we just had different goals. And I think the thing around the 5 people that you really spend the most time with define who you are and who you're going to be and what you want. And it's true. I mean, at the end of the day, it's true. And that I've had this conversation with people around, like, I feel like there have been groups of people that have defined phases of my life. Have felt kind of bad internally, just feeling like I didn't bring this friend group with me throughout my entire life, right? But that's just my journey. And it's because I was so laser focused on certain things. And it meant that I had to sacrifice some of those relationships along the way, not because I didn't want them, but because this proximity and like things in our lives just didn't match. And
that's real. There are going to be seasons of your life that are going to require you to be strategic about the influence that you're around and the things that you do. It's just a fact of life. I'm not hanging out with the same people that I was hanging out with in high school or in college. As an entrepreneur, I'm hanging out with different people than I was in corporate. It just is part of that journey. I'm curious for you, what has financial independence done for your role as a parent? Like, what are some of the things that you realize are a direct result of you being able to be financially independent?
I think it's a long-term mindset. Like, I'm not thinking about tomorrow. I mean, yeah, I have to think about tomorrow. Like, lunch is going to get made and all that other stuff. I get that. But like, tomorrow is not the end goal, nor is next month, right? This year was probably the first year in earnest that we looked at the entire year and planned out all of our trips. Because for us as business owners, like, that has to flow with how we take time off. Those were my most frustrating moments in the last 2 years because we didn't do that very well. And last year actually happened to be like just an emergency year because of a family emergency that took us back to Texas. And we were just very fortunate that we could drop everything and like take the whole family and go back to Texas for a month and a half, right? But I think just having I don't need instant gratification right now. And it's interesting, like I catch my boys doing this a lot, especially like with screens and just, Mom, can I have this? And like, they don't want for really anything at the end of the day, but figuring out how to start modeling that instant gratification isn't something that is required, and like being patient and willing to wait. And yeah, so we have like the piggy banks now. We're talking about like actual currency, and like we're using math and a lot of different things, like just little concepts. Like I've even shown them charts, and my husband's like, Stefanie, they're not going to understand this right now. And I'm like, hey, but if they know what a chart is, like they're doing pretty good. But I definitely think it comes down to this long-term mindset and understanding that the now isn't the end all. There's something out in the future. And if you can see that future, if you can kind of taste it even, and I hope that they can, in a way, taste that because they're seeing what we did, and we can be transparent about the things that we did. Like where we are right now isn't because we were lucky. It's because there were a lot of intentional things that got done and we saw them through. And so we're figuring out ways in which we can have these open dialogue conversations so that they can start hearing this stuff and it become normal versus don't talk about money. Grandma has money up her sleeve and she's going to sneak it to you underneath the desk because no one needs to see it. And yeah, it doesn't need to be like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Those lessons are very important. And I'm curious for you, what are you and your husband doing to ensure that, obviously your kids are going to have an abundance of opportunities that you may not have had as a child? I think one of the fear that I hear from a lot of parents is, okay, yeah, I want to build wealth for my kid. I don't want them to struggle financially, but how do I also make them good stewards of this wealth that I'm going to build for them? Like, what are you guys doing from a generational wealth perspective to set your kids up for success, but also make sure that that legacy continues?
Yeah, I think that appreciate their uniqueness and appreciate the value of being thinkers. We're thinking about this a lot right now with schools. I refuse to go pay a lot of money to have my kids come back with a crap ton of homework and be like robots. I just refuse. And that's kind of the first question I ask parents whenever we're talking about different schools in this area is like, what's the school like? How is homework? Is it test all the time? Are they thinking like, and there, you can tell just even with administration, like where schools are schools that are helping the kids be thinkers and problem solvers versus this all day. I mean, that's how we grew up, right? And so I think that's one element because I want them to have some level of entrepreneurial spirit that I honestly didn't have growing up. Like I just felt comfortable in knowing I had the job and knowing that I was advancing for someone else versus seeing that I could create value for people and I could bring ideas to the table and. So I think that's one element. The other thing, of course, is just the clear understanding of money and how it works and real estate. And like, I'm excited to bring them into the signing of something. They've already actually seen real estate projects and developments. Like my oldest today was like, hey mom, that was the second build that I saw, right? And I was like, yeah, it was. He's seen one in Bali. He's seen one here in Lisbon. And randomly he decided to bring that up. But he's seeing these things because of what we do. And he's thinking about, well, maybe I'll do that. Maybe I can do that because he can do that. He can see himself in those examples.
What about from an account perspective? Are you guys investing on behalf of your kids, and what does that look like?
Yeah, so we had this decision to make between 529 at the time and custodial accounts.
That's the existential crisis of every parent that I speak to.
Yes, but it was a very clear decision for us because we didn't feel like we were going to be tied to them going to college in the US. And so because of that, we felt like, okay, custodial account is the way that we want to go. There's flexibility in that for them from an education spend standpoint or not. And we didn't feel the angst around, oh, well, are they going to know what to do with that money? Our plan is not to have them question a lot about the money situation later on down the line. Our job is to prepare them, and they are going to be adults, and we're going to have to trust them at that point in time. It's life's lessons, right? Like, you can only do so much, but we're going to do our best to make sure that they are understanding what that responsibility looks like. And if they feel like they don't know, we want them to feel comfortable that they can ask. Questions and conversation, even in adulthood, are worth gold. Like I said, feel like money conversations are a natural conversation, and families that feel like they just can't. I hope to be the first.
I have a feeling that your sons will absolutely be looking to you as a continued source of support and knowledge and inspiration. I know that I do. And I know that folks who are listening to this episode will absolutely be inspired by what we've talked about. I want to know for you, what advice would you give to a family who wants to model what you're doing, live a financially independent life, maybe live overseas, but they're stuck in the decision-making phase? Can we do this? Is this realistic? What's one thing that you would advise them to do to come to that decision?
I think a little bit of this, I don't know if I can, is because we haven't given ourselves the opportunity to just go somewhere, even if it's for like a 1-week vacation. And I know that there's an expense tied to that, but heaven forbid that we plan for like an actual thing that we would enjoy, right? Versus like just the end goal. Because life, you do have to balance like the joy and the long-term benefits of what you're trying to strive for. I'll use my mom as a perfect example of this. She's really contemplating this move. And it's interesting. We're talking to many families, like entire units, the mom and dad and their 2 kids, and the grandma and grandpa and the sister. Like, there's a lot of interesting like family dynamics that are happening when it comes to immigration over here. But for my mom, I can tell that there's a little bit of anxiety for her in the decision-making process, because she just hasn't spent any time here. And she has the opportunity to come spend time here without having to pay for a hotel.
Right. I was going to say, I'm like, Abuela needs to hop on a flight.
Exactly. But there's all the excuses. And I think we have to cut through the excuses of why we cannot, or it'll have to happen during Christmas or whatever. We've got to use that PTO, and we've got to save for those trips, and we've got to take these trips with purpose versus sandals somewhere, just sipping a Mai Tai and maybe not getting a full out experience. And I know that sounds little, but just doing that sometimes, I hear people all the time, they're like, I took, my 25th anniversary trip and I fell in love with the country, and we're going to move there. People would tell me that about Austin all the time. I came here for a bachelorette party and I'm going to move here, right? So if you can do that in a city across the United States, take a bet on yourself and go travel to a place and see if it seems like a place you would see yourself living.
And what I would add is, let's stop assuming that we have all the time in the world. I think there's this assumption that we can do it next year, or when the kids are older, or when I make enough money, or when I leave this job, or when I have this amount of investments. And it's just like, y'all, there's so much assumption that happens that you will assume your way out of an entire fucking life, or just like trying to plan and just avoid any kind of uncomfortableness in this journey. And I promise you, anybody who's gotten to financial independence has gotten really comfortable doing uncomfortable shit and doing unconventional things and being okay, being the weirdo who is focusing on paying off debt instead of upgrading their car, or not buying the latest whatever because they know that money would be better used to invest. Like, just be okay making decisions for the today, because the assumption that tomorrow is promised, I think is foolish, and it will have you looking at life back with regret versus like, wow, I can't believe we did this.
I will say this. I don't think anyone who has taken an opportunity to focus on their mental well-being and just their like whole life sense has looked back and regretted that decision. The amount of clean food that I eat, the amount of sleep I get, the amount of steps I get in, the amount of sun I get. I tell people, if you met me 5 years ago, you'd be like, who is this person now? Right. And, I speak to a couple people from work still, and they're just so happy for me. And I am constantly telling them, like, what is it that you're doing for yourself? And like, what is the plan for you? Is this like what you want to do long term? And people might feel like I'm a broken record, but the reality is once you're on the other side, you just want more people to feel this too and see what is possible too. And so if you have someone in your life that is constantly talking about FI or whatever, take them up on it. Any little bit of action will go a long way.
Absolutely. I love that message, Stefanie. I love what you are doing. And I know folks are going to want to find out more about how they can work with you, how they can learn from you. So tell us where we can find you and what you have coming up.
Yeah, well, you can find me and my partner, Joe, at Move Me to Portugal, www.movemetoportugal.com. If you are interested in understanding what a path to Portugal could look like for you, whether that's through real estate or visas and immigration, you can book a call with us. And we have a comprehensive guide coming out this month in February that will cover everything from visas to real estate to getting a mortgage and all the other integration things like schools and getting a car and your driver's license. The idea is for it to be something simple for someone who's busy to understand all the critical things that you need to think about in your first couple of years, because it was a challenge getting here, and we want it to be simpler for people to have a clear path.
I love that. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for being an inspiration for us as Latinas of what financial independence can look like, not just for you, but for your family. And make sure that you follow Stefanie at Women's Wealth Effect and stay in the orbit, y'all, because she's doing a lot of cool shit. And I feel like I'm going to end up becoming a client of yours at some point and also doing the move because let me tell you, America's looking really ghetto nowadays.
I will say, if there's a word that you take away from this one, optionality is not a bad thing. And I think from a financial independence standpoint, we think about our plan B, but just as a global citizen, your American passport's one thing, but having another one is not a bad one. So educate yourself on what that could look like. And yeah, let me know if you have questions.
Amazing. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. Talk to you soon.